Padre Pio had gazed into a mother's eyes and spoke words that brought her to her knees in tears. She had just confessed that for years she hadn't taken her 3 children to Sunday Mass. She was working too hard. She was exhausted. Sundays were her only day of rest, and the saint from San Giovanni Rotondo, that man bearing the wounds of Christ on his hands, revealed exactly what happens in the spiritual realm when parents make this choice. What he saw in that moment would completely transform the way we understand a parent's responsibility for their children's souls. You might be thinking, this doesn't apply to you. Maybe you take your children to Mass now and then. Maybe you believe the important thing is to teach them to be good people. Maybe you think when they grow up, they can decide for themselves. But Padre Pio saw something completely different. He saw the eternal consequences of these seemingly small decisions. And in the next few minutes, you're going to discover truths that most Catholic parents are unaware of regarding the gravity of this omission. Before we continue, I need you to understand the context. Padre Pio wasn't an ordinary priest. For 50 years, from 1918 until his death in 1968, he carried the stigmata of Christ on his body, the very same wounds Jesus received on the cross. His hands bled, his feet bled, his side bled. And along with these stigmata, Padre Pio received extraordinary gifts. He could read people's thoughts. He could see the state of their souls. He could discern sins that had never been confessed. Thousands of people would wait in lines for days just to go to confession with him. And it was during these confessions that Padre Pio received terrifying visions. Visions that made him weep, visions that made him cry out, visions about the eternal destiny of souls, about what really happens after death, about the consequences of sins that most consider insignificant. The case of that mother happened in 1954. She had traveled from the area of Naples to San Giovanni Rotondo, specifically to confess to Padre Pio. Her name was Olivia, and she had carried a weight in her heart for many years. Her 3 children, ages 12, 10, and 7, had been baptized as infants. They had made their first communion. But after that, the family practically abandoned religious practice. Olivia worked as a seamstress 6 days a week. Her husband was a factory worker in a furniture plant. When Sunday arrived, all they wanted was to rest. The children preferred to play outside. Mass seemed like too great a sacrifice. After an exhausting week, she entered Padre Pio's confessional, intending to confess some minor sins, small lies, moments of impatience, gossiping with neighbors. But as she began to speak, Padre Pio interrupted her. "My daughter," he said with his hoarse, penetrating voice, "why don't you tell me about your children?" Olivia was confused. What was there to tell about her children? They were healthy children, well-behaved. They went to school, got good grades. Padre Pio interrupted her again. "Where are their souls, Olivia? Where are the souls of your children at this moment?" The woman didn't know how to answer. She had never thought in those terms. And then Padre Pio revealed what he was seeing, and what he described made Olivia fall to her knees in the confessional, sobbing. He said he saw 3 children surrounded by a dark cloud. This cloud represented the absence of sanctifying grace that should be constantly renewed through Sunday Mass. Each Sunday that passed without the family going to church, this cloud became denser, more impenetrable. And within this cloud, he saw shapes, shadows that watched the children, waiting, calculating, preparing the right moment to attack. Padre Pio explained that when a child is baptized, they receive an invisible spiritual armor. This armor protects them from the forces of evil. But this armor needs to be constantly polished, reinforced, renewed. And the main way to do this is through participation in Holy Mass. When parents neglect to take their children to Mass, this armor begins to weaken, to rust, to develop cracks. And these cracks, Padre Pio warned, are exactly what the enemy is looking for, Olivia asked, through tears. If it was too late, if the damage had already been done, if her children were condemned. Padre Pio responded with something the Church has always taught, but that few parents take seriously. He said that parents have a direct responsibility for the souls of their children, not just for their material education, not just for basic moral formation, but for their complete spiritual life. And that on Judgment Day, parents will have to account for every Sunday Mass they failed to take their children to. This isn't just Padre Pio's opinion. This is clearly established in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Parents are primarily responsible for the education of their children, and this education fundamentally includes religious formation, participation in sacramental life, the habit of prayer, and above all, Sunday Mass. But here's something that few Catholics fully understand. Mass isn't simply a religious obligation to be fulfilled. It's not just a rule of the Church that can be occasionally ignored. Sunday Mass is the moment when we receive the graces necessary to resist the temptations of the week. It's the moment when we are spiritually nourished. It's the moment when our souls are strengthened against the attacks of evil. When a child is deprived of this, week after week, month after month, year after year, what happens? Padre Pio saw it clearly. The child becomes spiritually malnourished, vulnerable, exposed. And the effects of this spiritual malnutrition, Padre Pio cautioned, often don't appear immediately. A child who doesn't go to Mass may seem perfectly normal. They may be well behaved. They may get good grades. They may be loving towards their parents. But inside, on a spiritual level that our eyes cannot see, something is being corroded. Padre Pio told Olivia about another case he had witnessed years before, an entire family that had abandoned religious practice. The parents were nominal Catholics. They had baptized their children because it was tradition. They had made their first communion because it was socially expected. But after that, faith became a distant memory. The children grew up. They became adults. And it was only then that the fruits of this neglect manifested. One of them completely lost their faith. Another entered into a disastrous marriage. The third developed addictions that destroyed their life. The fourth daughter fell into despair and nearly took her own life. The parents, now elderly, came to Padre Pio, desperate. What had they done wrong? They had given their children everything: home, food, education, love. Why did it all go wrong? And Padre Pio, with tears in his eyes, had to explain the painful truth. "You gave your children everything," he said, "except what was essential. You filled their bodies, but you let their souls starve." That's the severity of what we're talking about here. It's not a matter of being more or less observant. It's not a matter of personal preference. It's a matter of spiritual life or death. And parents are primarily responsible for the spiritual lives of their children. Padre Pio also received visions about what happened in purgatory to parents who had neglected this responsibility. And these visions were particularly terrifying. He told of a soul who had been in purgatory for over 100 years, not for sins she had committed against herself, but for sins of omission in relation to her children. This soul had to watch, from purgatory, the consequences of her negligence propagating through the generations. The children who had not been taken to Sunday Mass grew up and also did not take their children. And they, in turn, also did not take theirs, and so on. Each soul lost in that chain, Padre Pio revealed, adds time to the purgatory of the original parents, because the initial responsibility was theirs. They planted the seed of negligence, and now they were reaping the bitter fruits through the generations. Margarita was in shock. She had never thought of Sunday Mass in these terms. She had never imagined that something apparently so simple could have such profound and lasting consequences. Padre Pio then gave her specific instructions. First, she should make a full confession, not just of these years of negligence, but of all the sins she could remember. Second, she should immediately resume the practice of taking her children to Mass every Sunday, no exceptions. Third, she should explain to her children why this was important, not as an arbitrary rule, but as a matter of spiritual protection. And fourth, and this is very important, she should pray a special novena for the souls of her children, a novena asking Our Lady to intercede for them and repair the spiritual damage that had already been caused. Margherita followed all these instructions, and years later, she returned to San Giovanni Rotondo to thank Padre Pio. All three of her children had become practicing Catholics. They had gotten married in the church. They were raising their own children in the faith. The chain of negligence had been broken, but not all stories end like this. Padre Pio also witnessed cases where parents received the warning but chose to ignore it. There was a man from Rome who came to confess to Padre Pio in 1961. He was a nominal Catholic who only went to church for weddings and funerals. His 4 children had never been taken to Mass regularly. When Padre Pio warned him about the consequences, the man became irritated. "Father," he said, "my children are good boys. I don't need to take them to church for them to be decent people. Religion is a thing of the past. The important thing is to be honest and hard-working." Padre Pio was silent for a long moment, and then he said something that made the man's blood run cold. "You ask me why you should take your children to Mass, but in 15 years you will ask me why God allowed tragedy to strike your family. And on that day I will not be able to console you, because you are choosing now the path that will lead to that suffering." The man left the confessional angrily. He considered Padre Pio a fanatic, an outdated priest who didn't understand the modern world. 15 years later, in 1976, exactly as Padre Pio had predicted, tragedy struck. One of his sons died in a car accident, coming back from a party where he had drunk too much. Another was arrested for involvement with drugs. The third abandoned his family and disappeared. Only the fourth, who, through the influence of a devout grandmother, had begun to attend Mass, hidden from his father, remained on the right path. The man, now elderly and destroyed, remembered Padre Pio's words, but the saint had already died in 1968. There was no one left to turn to. There was no way to go back. Pay attention, because there's an even deeper aspect to this issue that we need to explore. Padre Pio explained that Mass is not just a moment of prayer. It is the moment when heaven literally descends to earth. It is the moment when angels and saints gather around the altar. It is the moment when Jesus Christ becomes present in a real and substantial way in the Eucharist. When a child participates in Mass, even if they don't fully understand what is happening, their soul is being bathed in this divine presence. It is being strengthened. It is being protected. The guardian angels of the children receive special graces during Mass to protect their little ones. But when parents keep their children at home, playing video games, watching television, sleeping in late, these graces are denied. The spiritual armor is not renewed. And the demons, who are always lurking, perceive this vulnerability. Padre Pio was very clear about this. Demons have a special interest in children. Why? Because children represent the future. If a demon manages to turn a child away from the faith, he potentially turns away all future generations that will descend from that child. It's a long-term strategy, and parents who neglect the religious formation of their children are unknowingly cooperating with this strategy. You may be thinking that this seems exaggerated, that in the modern world these ideas seem medieval, that surely God would not punish loving parents just because they didn't take their children to Mass. But Padre Pio would say that you are confusing true love with sentimentalism. True love means wanting the best for the other, and the best for any human being is eternal salvation. A parent who gives their child everything materially, but neglects their soul, is not truly loving. They are just being comfortable. And comfort, Padre Pio warned, is one of the greatest enemies of salvation. There's another important aspect that we need to consider. The obligation of Sunday Mass is not a human invention. It is not an arbitrary rule created by some pope or council. It is a divine commandment. The third commandment says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." And since the earliest centuries of Christianity, that day has been Sunday, the day of the resurrection. Participation in Sunday Mass is how Catholics fulfill this commandment. When parents do not take their children to Mass, they are teaching their children that the commandments of God are optional, that they can be fulfilled when it is convenient, that human will is above divine will, and that lesson, absorbed in childhood, will have devastating consequences in adulthood. Padre Pio witnessed this constantly in his confessional. Adults who had lost their faith, adults living in mortal sin, adults who couldn't find peace or purpose in their lives. And when he investigated the origins of these problems, he almost always found the same pattern: a childhood where religious practice was neglected by their parents. The first 7 years of life, Padre Pio taught, are fundamental for spiritual formation. It is during this period that a child forms their deepest habits, their most lasting associations, their most ingrained beliefs. A child who is taken to Sunday Mass regularly from infancy develops a natural connection with the sacred. The church becomes a familiar place. The ritual of the Mass becomes comforting. The presence of God becomes something expected and desired. But a child who is kept away from the church develops the exact opposite. The church becomes a strange place. The ritual of the Mass becomes boring or incomprehensible. The presence of God becomes something distant and abstract. And when that child grows up, what will their natural tendency be? To return to something that has always been strange and uncomfortable, or to continue on the path that their parents laid out for them? Padre Pio knew the answer, and that's why he was so insistent with the parents who came to confession. But there is hope in this message too. Padre Pio didn't preach only condemnation, he also preached redemption. For Sarah, the mother who had neglected her children, there was a way back. There was reparation, there was healing. Her children, despite years of absence from Sunday Mass, found faith and passed that faith on to the next generation. What made the difference? The change in attitude of the parents, the firm decision to put God first, the unwavering commitment to take their children to Sunday Mass every week, without exception. Padre Pio said that it's never too late to start. Even if your children are already teenagers, even if they already have resistance to the church, even if it seems impossible to change established habits, because the grace of God is more powerful than any human habit, and when parents do their part, God does his. But this requires sacrifice. It requires giving up the comfort of Sunday morning in bed. It requires facing the complaints of the children. It requires resisting the temptation to leave it for next week. It requires absolute consistency. And here's something that few parents understand. Example is more powerful than words. A child who sees their parents waking up early every Sunday, dressing with care, going to church with devotion, absorbs a profound message. They learn that faith is important, that God deserves our time, that there are things greater than our personal comfort. On the other hand, a child who sees their parents sleeping in while they should be at Mass learns the opposite lesson. They learn that faith is optional, that rest is more important than God, that adults say one thing but do another, and which of these children will be more likely to maintain their faith when they grow up? Padre Pio also warned about a very common excuse that he heard from parents. Many said that they preferred to leave their children free to choose their own religion when they grew up, that they didn't want to impose anything, that they wanted to respect the autonomy of the children. This excuse, Padre Pio said, is one of the greatest lies that the devil has planted in the hearts of modern parents. Think about it. Do you leave your child free to choose whether they want to go to school? Do you leave your child free to choose whether they want to eat vegetables or only sweets? Do you leave your child free to choose whether they want to respect traffic laws? Of course not. In all these areas, you understand that children do not have the maturity to make the best choices. That's why you impose limits. You establish rules. You use your authority as a parent to guide your child in the right direction. Why would it be different with faith? Why exactly in the most important area of life? The area that determines the eternal destiny of the soul. Do modern parents decide to omit themselves? Padre Pio saw clearly that this was not respect for the freedom of children. It was cowardice from the parents. It was fear of seeming old-fashioned. It was a desire to be the cool parent who doesn't impose rules, but being cool, Padre Pio warned, is not going to save your child's soul. There is yet another point that Padre Pio emphasized. Sunday Mass does not benefit only the child who participates. It benefits the entire family. It benefits the entire community. It even benefits the souls in purgatory. When a family goes to Sunday Mass together, they are creating spiritual bonds that transcend this life. They are building a foundation that will withstand the storms that will inevitably come. They are preparing for the eternity that they will spend together in heaven. Padre Pio told about a vision he had once. He saw a family in heaven, parents, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all together before God. And this family was there because generations before, a couple had made the decision to take their children to Sunday Mass every Sunday. This simple decision, repeated week after week, year after year, had created a chain of faith that spanned generations and led an entire family to eternal salvation. On the other hand, Padre Pio also saw families who were separated eternally, parents in heaven crying for children who were in hell, or parents in purgatory tormented by the vision of their descendants growing further and further away from God. And in many of these cases, the turning point had been the decision not to take the children to Sunday Mass. Does it seem dramatic? Padre Pio would say that it's not dramatic enough, because we are talking about eternity. We are talking about forever. We are talking about a separation that will have no end. And parents have in their hands the power to influence what the eternal destiny of their children will be. But hold on, because now comes the most practical part of this message. What exactly should parents do? Padre Pio was very specific in his guidance. First, Sunday Mass must be treated as non-negotiable. It's not something you do when there's nothing better to do. It's the most important commitment of the week. Everything else is organized around it. Second, parents should prepare their children for Mass. This means explaining what's going to happen, explaining why it's important, explaining what each part of the ritual means. A child who understands what's happening participates in a much more engaged way than one who is just sitting there without knowing why. Third, parents should set an example of devotion. It's no use dragging children to Mass if the parents themselves are looking at their watches, yawning, or thinking about lunch. Children perceive everything, and they learn much more by example than by words. Fourth, Sunday Mass should be complemented by family prayer. Padre Pio especially recommended the Rosary. A family that prays together stays together, he said. The Rosary, it weaves a spiritual armor around your home, protecting every member of your family. And fifth, parents must consecrate their children to Our Lady. Padre Pio had an immense devotion to Mary. He believed that no soul truly consecrated to her could ever be lost, and he urged all parents to make this consecration for their children. But there's an obstacle that many parents face, and Padre Pio had guidance for this too. What do you do when your children resist? Teenagers especially often complain. They say it's boring, that it's a waste of time, that they'd rather sleep in, that none of their friends go to Sunday Mass. Padre Pio was very direct on this point. He said parents must not give in to this pressure, just as they don't give in when their child doesn't want to go to school or doesn't want to eat healthy food. They shouldn't give in when their child doesn't want to go to Sunday Mass. Paternal authority, Padre Pio taught, was given by God specifically to guide children in the right direction. Using this authority to lead your children to church isn't authoritarianism, it's love. And he also reassured worried parents. Many teenagers resist at the time, but they'll thank you later when life gets tough, when they face temptations, when they need God. They remember the path their parents showed them, and they return. But if the path was never shown, where will they return to? Padre Pio also spoke about the importance of choosing the right parish. Not all masses are created equal. Some are more reverent, better celebrated, more conducive to awakening faith in children. Parents should seek the best option available, even if it means driving a little further or waking up a little earlier. And he warned against hurried masses, where it seems the priest is in a rush to finish, against noisy masses, where there's more entertainment than worship, against mundane masses, where the presence of God seems absent. The Holy Mass, Padre Pio insisted, is the most sacred act that exists on the face of the earth. It's Calvary made present. It's the moment when heaven and earth meet, and children need to experience this in its most authentic and reverent form. There was a priest who visited Padre Pio in San Giovanni Rotondo back in the 60s. He was discouraged because his parish had very few children at Mass. The parents simply weren't bringing them. Padre Pio listened to his complaints and then asked a surprising question. "How do you celebrate the Mass, Father?" The priest was confused. He followed all the rubrics. He did everything correctly. Padre Pio insisted, "But do you celebrate it as if it's the most important thing in the universe? Do you celebrate it as if Jesus Christ is really present? Do you celebrate it as if the entire heaven is watching?" The priest had to admit that over time, the Mass had become routine for him, something he did automatically, without the same devotion as at the beginning of his priesthood. Padre Pio then said something that the priest never forgot. If you don't truly believe in what you're doing, how can you expect families to believe? The children can sense when the Mass is just an empty obligation, and they'll also sense when it's a true experience of the sacred. This priest returned to his parish transformed. He began to celebrate every Mass as if it were the last of his life, as if Jesus was physically present on the altar, as if the angels were all around him. And something extraordinary happened. The families began to notice the difference. The children began to pay attention. The church slowly started to fill up. Faith began to be reborn in that community. Padre Pio knew that the responsibility wasn't just on the parents. Priests have a crucial role too. But for parents, the message was clear. Don't stop taking your children to Mass because of imperfect celebrations. Do your part and trust that God will do His. There is also a supernatural dimension that Padre Pio revealed about Mass and children. He said that the guardian angels of children receive special graces during Mass to protect their little ones. Imagine, he said, an invisible army of angels receiving spiritual weapons and armor. Every time a child participates in Mass, these weapons are used during the week to defend the child against temptations, bad thoughts, negative influences. But when the child doesn't go to Mass, their guardian angel doesn't receive this reinforcement. He's still there, still protects, but he's limited. It's like a soldier sent to battle without enough ammunition. And the battles our children face today are more intense than ever. The internet, social media, friends who mock faith, a culture that ridicules purity, a society that celebrates everything. That's contrary to Christian values. Our children need all the spiritual protection possible, and denying them Sunday Mass is like sending a soldier to the battlefield without a bulletproof vest. Padre Pio also spoke about the power of children at Mass, not just what the children receive, but what they offer. The innocence of children, he said, makes their prayers especially powerful. When a child prays during Mass, something happens in heaven. The angels rejoice, the saints draw near. God himself leans down to listen. A Mass with children present isn't a Mass disturbed by noise, it's a Mass blessed by innocence. Padre Pio was angry with priests who discouraged the presence of children because of noise. "Let the little children come to me," Jesus said. And Padre Pio took that very seriously. Children belong at Mass. They belong in the church. They belong in the heart of Jesus. And parents who keep them away are committing an act of injustice, both against the children and against God. You've just discovered profound truths about the spiritual responsibility of parents. Truths that Padre Pio revealed throughout decades of ministry, truths that can literally determine the eternal destiny of entire families. Each video like this requires hours of research in the archives of San Giovanni Rotondo, in the testimonies of devotees, in the letters and writings of Padre Pio himself. It's a work of bringing to light revelations that many would prefer to remain forgotten. If these truths have touched your heart, the super thanks down below is a way for you to say that this work of evangelization must continue. It's not just financial support. It's you becoming part of this mission to bring the words of Padre Pio to families who need to hear them. It's you saying that the souls of children deserve this protection. When you click on that golden heart, you become a guardian of this message that can save generations. Now let me tell you what you can do today, this week, to transform the spiritual life of your family. Padre Pio left us a specific protocol for parents who want to renew their commitment to Sunday Mass, and I'm going to share that with you right now. First, make a sincere confession. Confess specifically the Sundays when you could have taken your children to Mass, but you didn't. Not out of guilt, but for liberation. To start over with a clear conscience. Second, consecrate your family to Our Lady. There are many formulas for consecration. The most well-known is that of St. Louis de Montfort. Do this as a family, with your children present. Explain to them what it means to be under Mary's protection. Third, establish the habit of the Rosary in your family. It can be just 1 decade a day, 5 minutes. Padre Pio said that a family that prays the Rosary together is shielded against the forces of evil. The demons flee from the sound of the Hail Mary, repeated with devotion. Fourth, prepare for Mass during the week. Read the Sunday readings with your children. Explain the gospel in words they understand. When they arrive at Mass, they'll already know what it's about. They'll participate in a much more active way. Fifth, maintain a sacred routine for Sunday morning. Wake up a little earlier, dress with care, as if you're going to meet someone important, because you are. Arrive at church before Mass begins. Stay until the priest leaves the altar. These small things communicate reverence to your children. And sixth, don't give up. There will be difficult Sundays. There will be resistance. There will be temptation to put it off until next week. But each time you persist, you are depositing graces into the spiritual account of your family. Graces that will yield dividends for all eternity. Padre Pio promised that no effort made to lead your children to God will be wasted. Not a single Sunday, not a single prayer, not a single tear shed for the salvation of a child. God sees everything. God rewards everything. And on Judgment Day, the parents who were faithful in this mission will hear the sweetest words in the universe. Blessed are you who have led your children to me. Now, I need to hear from you, because this message has touched thousands of families, but I want to know specifically about you. Team takes the kids to Mass every Sunday versus team goes when we can. Which are you? Be honest in the comments. And if you're on the second team, but you want to change, write that too. Tell me what the biggest obstacle you face is. Tell me what prevents you from having that consistency, because your story can help another family that faces the same struggle. And if you've already seen the fruits of taking your children to Mass, tell us that too. Tell us how your children's faith has grown. Tell us the signs of protection that you've noticed. Your testimony might be exactly what another parent needs to hear to make the right decision. Padre Pio said that each soul saved is an eternal victory. And the souls of our children are the most precious of all. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Worry is useless. God is merciful and will hear your prayer. May Saint Padre Pio intercede for you and your family. May Our Lady cover your children with her protective mantle. And may, each Sunday, when you bring your family to Mass, the angels celebrate in heaven another victory against the darkness. The grace of God be with you. Amen.